Welcome to the Scott Holm podcast back here on a Tuesday night after an extremely busy week from the world of Houston Cougar sports. Dustin, bat and ball sport conference season is here. That kind of snuck up on me. A big Cougar men's basketball win to talk about that just happened last Saturday night. That something that sounds familiar. It was kind of a roller coaster Big 12 road basketball one. We've had a few of those this year, but obviously happy to be talking about a win. A conference championship that's not a conference championship, but feels like one that we're going to talk about as well from one of the winter sports here. A lot of really important stuff happening on Cullen Boulevard, as it always is this time of year. Dustin, anything important happened in your life outside the world of Houston Cougar sports in the last we'll just pick an arbitrary amount of time, a week or so?
Since Friday. Yeah, no, I got some really good brunch on Friday. I think it's what you're talking about. It was really delicious.
You
Really,
went to the Arboretum. I love the Arboretum. Like
I went
honestly,
to
like Houston is so like I love Houston. I'm from Houston. This is but like there are so few things I'm like, yeah, it's an outdoor thing I like to do in Houston and would like recommend heartily and would do it again if I lived in Houston. It's like the Arboretum in like Herman Park when it's not like the summer or late spring are basically the list.
that's about it. And that is why I utilized the Arboretum on Friday to propose to my lovely partner, and uh, much to my happy, no, I wouldn't say surprise, but much to my happy, she said yes, and we had had a great, just kind of did like an all day date on Friday, and then went up to the hill country where her family is from, and they threw her kind of a semi-surprise engagement party on Saturday. So really good time, had an awesome weekend. This is how great my fiance and my future in-laws are. So her mom, went to OU, huge OU sports fan in every sport. Her brother went to OU, huge OU fan in every sport. The whole family, that's just kind of their team. She went to a small private school in Oklahoma, so they're not really, don't really have a big time of sports at her alma mater. So that's always been her school, to cheer for in sports her whole life is OU. And because we've gone to so many U of H games in men's basketball and, just watch them on TV at home, she actually told me a while back, she goes, you know what? She goes, U of H is actually my number one rooting interest for men's basketball and men's basketball only, which I'll totally happily take. So we were up there. Yeah, I planned the great idea. Let's propose and have an engagement party right before the game when, Houston plays Oklahoma. And me, her mom, and her brother all watched the game together, and she cheered for Houston in front of them, and like they were accepting of it, and everyone still came out of it loving each other, and it all worked out well. So, yeah, really excited to have that going on and to be thinking about the whole marriage thing for the first time in my life. So that's pretty awesome, and yeah, I guess also not too shabby in terms of things going on Cougar wise as well as you mentioned at the top. A lot going on, and very very excited to have the calendar returning to March and everything that means for both March Madness as well as kind of like you said getting into some Big 12 conference play in the bat and ball sports.
I'll just use my little this little place I have that people actually voluntarily listen to me to like to vouch for your now fiance being just an awesome person and couldn't be more excited for both of you. I would also, if she was like, I'm now more of a Cougar football fan than OU football. I say this as somebody who lives and dies with Cougar football, but I'd be like, you need to question her mental health. She's got like a
Don't
strong tie to a good football. Like don't dive into that. Like if you had secondary team, that's fine, but like come on, like it's I get it. If I had some tie to Oklahoma football, that'd be kind of tough not to go all in on that as my number one team there. But couldn't be more excited for both of you, my good friend and co-host Bobby. As you probably noticed if you were listening or watching this, is not here. I normally make up a funny story whenever one of my co-hosts, you or Bobby, is not here. Nothing would be funnier than what actually happened here. That Bobby forgot what day of the week was what, and had a conflict that both of us understandably wouldn't have expected him to elect to do a podcast over. So I presume after that he's be doing some kind of Billy Madison situation where he relearns other really basic things and goes through levels of schooling. So Bobby will be back next time we record, but just wanted to note his absence as well. Want to note also, of course, please, if you don't do so already, support us over on our Patreon, patreon.com/SHPAWDcast. Plenty of cool stuff coming here of this big basketball tournament mid-March over on the Patreon, of course. Also support our friends at the 1012 Network at TN12 Network, wherever you social media. Subscribe to the 1012 podcast, our mothership podcast, over wherever you get podcasts. As well, going to mention our first and not last sponsor tonight, little tease there. Our good friends Charlie Hustle with the incredible new Cougar jackets now available at charliehustle.com. White, red Houston logo on it. Really cool stuff. I literally ordered it within minutes of Charlie Hustle DMing us and being like, "Hey, the jackets are now available." And I think I was in my office at work. This is Friday mid morning, and I just did an audible, "Oh my god!" and immediately I ordered one before I could get a bigger discount to order it as a partner. Did use the promo code SHP15. SHP15 is going to save you 15% on your order. It's not just the jackets. Charlie Hustle has a fantastic collection of shirts, crew necks, and hoodies as well. Great vintage Houston Cougar designs on there. But the jacket's been something I've been looking forward to since basically the moment it became clear that we would become partners with Charlie Hustle before this current season. And it was just couldn't be more excited. Saw a number of y'all order it as well. I'm excited collectively for all of y'all out there as well, and plenty of good stuff. If that is not your sartorial choice, like I said before, shirts, hoodies, crew necks, charliehustle.com, great Cougar collection there. You're gonna like whatever you get from there, and please don't forget when you go there to use our promo code SHP15. And I'm super excited tonight on the podcast to announce our newest sponsor, Autograph. You've probably noticed over the years that we don't take a ton of specific sponsors and partnerships on this show. That's not because people don't reach out to us, believe it or not. I'm not going to say our inbox is inundated with Fortune 500 companies going to sponsor us, but we have turned down far, far, far more, just elected not to do far, far more than we've elected to do. I think we try to be picky with who we associate ourselves with. That's why you also don't hear autoplay ads at the beginning or middle or the end of the show, like maybe doing others. I mean, not a knock on anyone who does it, just how we do things here in this pod. And Autograph, quite frankly, is something I've been kind of trying to find in my life for many years as a sports fan, more specifically as a Houston Cougar sports fan. That's incredibly simple and wonderful. It's a completely free app available on Android and Apple. You could sign up for using our promo code SHPAWD, SHPod, spelled out there. I'm also going to put up the sign up link for us specifically in the show notes if you want to go there. So, what is Autograph? It's basically a one-stop shop that gives you all the current Cougar news, blogs, and podcasts in an easy and clean format, organized, really simple and wonderful. You have a feed with the most recent U of H stories and blogs, along with top listens, including our wonderful podcast. You earn fan points for reading and reacting to stories, listening to pods. There's also a specific podcast tab for all of Autograph's offers for the U of H community. More on that here in a second. And you can get up-to-date scores and upcoming U of H events. As well, we'll also mention one of my favorite things about it is the true fan pricing, where fans of specific schools can get deeply discounted tickets to big games, including a big basketball game coming up, the U of H Kansas game here on Saturday. Dustin, that's $32 for 2 packages of 2 tickets. When I looked this up, literally the cheapest ones you can get on the secondary market now are like in the $240 to $250 range for UH Kansas. So you can win super cheap, nice seats to this big game by downloading Autograph and signing up with that promo code SHPAWD, SHPod. So really excited for that partnership. Make sure you download Autograph ASAP, support our show and all the wonderful people who are on there also creating UH content on the World Wide Web. Dustin, it's nearly all good news when it comes to Houston Cougar men's basketball, but I think we got some big news here that we got to talk about at the top before we talk about the game that just happened in Norman on Saturday against the Oklahoma Sooners, and obviously 2 big games coming up here in the not too distant future.
Yeah, you've got me on a real roller coaster of emotions, Sam, because I was literally downloading the Autograph app while you were speaking and describing it to me. And then I am also excited to be talking about Cougar basketball continuing to win Big 12 road games. But yeah, unfortunately going to lead with some bad news, and that is that we found out this week that JoJo Tugler has a broken foot, joining Terrence Arsenault and Ramon Walker on the done for the year list for Houston, as the Cougars bench just kind of seems to be disintegrating before our eyes. Then that's all your forwards off the bench. That's after Wani and JV are your 2 starting forwards. JoJo was kind of your true forward off the bench. Terrence and Ramon were guys that could certainly be kind of a small ball 4 to help you out off the bench. And now you've got none of those 3 guys available, which means that going forward, like we're going to talk about here with the Oklahoma game in a little bit, your forward on the bench is Said Lot, a true freshman who coming into the Oklahoma game had played 45 minutes on the season, almost all of them mop up minutes. So you've got 8 scholarship players at this point that are healthy and are not redshirting this year. we might see one of those red shirts come off at some point. And then, if things keep getting worse, it's hard to say what's going to happen the rest of the year. But yeah, just so disappointing for Tugler. Just, a freshman who had shown so much this year in terms of just his, obviously looking like a freshman at times, but just the way he could impact games, getting his hands on so many balls on the defensive end, blocks and steals and deflections was such a big piece. Someone who, like we saw in the game in Austin, really came in and gave you a bunch of key minutes down the stretch. And that one was a big part of why Houston won the game in Austin, has been a big part of what Houston's been doing in Big 12 play, and someone who, like I said, not to say he didn't look like a freshman, but has been really surprisingly, I think, ready for Division One action, for high level, for Big 12 action right away in his freshman season. So obviously, huge piece off the bench, and that's not the news you want heading into March, is to know that all of a sudden you're kind of reshuffling things. You're asking someone to play more minutes than they have up until this point, and you're losing a really dynamic athlete and a defensive playmaker off the bench in JoJo Tugler.
Yeah, I'm glad you said it like that, because it's not just that you're losing a body. Like JoJo Tugler has been, I think, really impressive. There have been so many times where you or I or Bobby have come back here and been like, okay, this guy's not the finished product, but looking beyond a freshman in terms of his ability to contribute at a high level, it really key moments, giving you like big minutes. I think just one example of many, like down the stretch in Austin, in that game where you beat the Horns, you don't win that game, a very close one where you had to kind of cling on in the second half and ultimately win an OT without JoJo giving you some very key minutes in that one game. What I remember, even though it was a loss, even though JoJo didn't have a massive impact on it, was how many minutes he gave you against Kansas in the game up in Lawrence after Javier went down really early. That's scary, and thankfully not long-term knock to the back of the head there. Like all that, and God bless said lot, but not a guy you were expecting to give any minutes other than late in the game after it was well decided. And now you have no choice but to. Now you have no choice but to give some minutes to this guy. Not every game is going to be the worst case scenario that Oklahoma was in terms of JVR. I don't want to. I feel like I jinx it every time I come on here. Just like we talked about it, and I think I was the prime mover there about he's doing pretty good with foul trouble, and just has had a number of games recently with more foul trouble. Though I still think the balance has been a lot better there. But not every game is going to have JVR fouling out with 11 minutes and 5 fouls. But it probably also won't be the last time he runs into foul trouble, and maybe we haven't noticed as much previously because, like you said, you had JoJo Tugler previously, and also you had guys like Walker and Arsenault who aren't true fours in any sense of, but can kind of, like you said, play a small ball. So excited to see him come back next season. Hate that he's not a part of what looks like a very good team. Yeah, just it's bummer of news. And like Samson said, I think at his radio show last night, that none of the guys with injuries are returning this year, which I don't know if that's referring to Walker, Tugler, and Arsenault. Excuse me, I don't know what blank there. And not, I was gonna say, because I know Cordell Jefferson, which I know he doesn't play the same position, but I'm just Cordell Jefferson and Jacob McFarland, both redshirting this year, and both I think had some kind of injury at some point, but I don't know if that I don't know if those guys would theoretically be healthy to play. I mean, McFarland's the only big man of the two of them, but yeah, it's not what you needed at this point in the season. Not that this could keep this team from winning a regular season Big 12 title or being a 1 seed. Like I also don't want to overstate what JoJo Tugler was, but man, you needed his depth at the very least right now, and unfortunately you have to figure out a way to survive the next month of the season without it.
Yeah, he certainly, JoJo looked like a guy that was going to contribute for this team in March, especially if you wanted to make a late NCAA tournament run. He was your best piece in the front court off the bench. So, that falls to Said Lie, who's got a whole year pretty much at this point of practicing against some really good forwards and Houston starters, and even against against JoJo as well. So, big chance for him to step up, and hopefully everyone stays healthy from here, and we're not trying to discuss the Jacob McFarland red shirt injury situation, because again, I think it gets, like I said, it gets tougher to make a long, lengthy March run without JoJo Tugler, but you lose one more guy in the front court, and it starts going from sounding harder to sounding closer to impossible. So just absolutely wish casting nothing but full health for this crew the rest of the way. And yeah, got their first test of life without JoJo Tugler on the bench this past weekend up in Norman and did come away with the 87-85 win over the Sooners for the fifth time in Houston's last 6 road games in the Big 12. We had a game come down to the wire and we had the Cougars holding on for the victory. This time, of course, the big play that everybody will be talking about is the one in the closing seconds of the game with the game tied when Jamal Shead drove to the basket, missed the shot in the scramble for the rebound. Shead got it back, put the ball in with what was ultimately ruled to be 0.4 seconds left, and the Cougs would deflect the full court pass and grab their 13th Big 12 win in 16 tries this year, with Shead's shot being the game winner. But as much as this game was about Shead's game winner, this game for me, kind of like we're alluding to, was more about the incredibly resilient effort from the entire Cougar team in something close to a worst case scenario. Like we are kind of talking about Tugler. Suddenly, this is his first game out for the year. You're down to an 8-man rotation with your sole big being Said Lot. With your so literally your 3 forwards available for this game were Juwan Roberts, who missed a stretch of game action to get stitches in his hand, Javier Francis, who only played 12 minutes before fouling out, and Lot, your true freshman, who, as we mentioned, hadn't really played any significant minutes up until until this game. And it's not like your backcourt was totally spared either. Jamal Shead had a banged up shin at one point, missed some minutes, as well as missing some minutes due to foul trouble. Emmanuel Sharp only played 26 minutes with foul trouble in this one. The Cougs were a walking mash unit. 3 of their starters got in foul trouble. I would say 1 to 2 of the fouls against each of those 3 guys were probably dubious at best. 0 Sooner starters got in foul trouble in this game. OU shot nearly 50% from beyond the arc and committed only 8 turnovers. This game had every possible ingredient for an upset. It should have happened, it feels like, but Houston won because every single guy stepped up. LJ and Wani both had excellent offensive games and got 20-plus points efficiently. LJ played all 40 minutes in this one. Jamal had 14 points and 6 dimes. Sharp in double digits, 3 of 5 from deep despite the reduced minutes. Malik Wilson, phenomenal off the bench, 10 points. Had a flawless offensive game, made all 4 of his field goals, both of his free throws, 0 turnovers. That is a flawless offensive game for 10 points to go with 5 boards. Damian Dunn made some big plays at a couple of big threes as well. So, man, Sam, it's funny talking to my OU family. They were like, we're not that good this year. I can't believe it was that close. And I'm just like, everything went wrong for us. Just absolutely everything went wrong in terms of personnel available, fouls, the whole 9 yards. So maybe it wouldn't impress a Sooner fan that's not real happy with their team, but I was impressed as hell with Houston in this one for the resilience that they showed to get another road win and get one step closer to a Big 12 regular season title.
I mean, you said it in so many ways. This game felt like the worst case scenario. On the road as the #1 team against a quality, probably future NCAA tournament opponent who, in this specific case, really Oklahoma would have put themselves firmly on the right side of the tournament bubble with a win over U of H. That I think almost in alone scares me more than facing a team like Baylor or BYU, who are the kinds of teams that are firmly locked into the tournament field, who at this point are just playing for seeding pride, conference standing, all that stuff. OU, I think it's still a safe bet to hear their name read on Selection Sunday, but they would have made that certainty if they'd won on Saturday night. And thanks to that timely shot from Jamal Shead and this team fighting through adversity, I think, unfortunately for the Sooners, they weren't able to cement their postseason future. And this game was also a reminder of something I think I've personally been coming on here and beating the drum about a lot, that this is a very good offensive team. Yes, they can also be prone to dry spells or having one really strong half and one pretty meh half, but I will die on this hill that I think portions of this fan base almost disrespect the ability of this team to put the ball in the hoop. This is a very good offensive team. I would say among Kelvin Sampson's teams, I would still maybe put them behind the 21 Final Four team in terms of offensive ceiling, but obviously much higher defensive ceiling there as well. And I think we really saw that on Saturday night. We saw the Cougs score almost 90 in regulation, 1.36 points per possession against an opponent who, even after that display, is still a top 30 defensive team. And Jamal Shead's not all the way back, and his scoring line won't jump off the page at you, but I thought coming off pretty poor shooting performances against Baylor and Cincy that he didn't look like a guy who was low on confidence. And I think that's important. It's the kind of progression you want to see from a veteran guard who's kind of lived the ups and downs of a few college basketball seasons previously. And got LJ Cryer, like you said, you had to play him all 40 minutes this game because of that foul trouble to Sharp, Shead being banged up, all that stuff. And I think prior to this, you'd kind of seen Cryer's better games skew more towards playing in the Fertitta Center. And Saturday night was the kind of performance I expected when we brought him in from Baylor's. This guy is a proven high level scorer. You're not gonna get this every night. I don't think that's realistic, but you saw an LJ Cryer who's capable of changing a game with his scoring ability, which I think we've seen at home, but maybe didn't see as much in the road games. It's almost crazy, by the way, how good Wani is now that it took me this long and you didn't leave with it either. Not that, not a criticism here, Dustin, because I wouldn't have either if I had been the first one to talk about it. That no biggie, like 10 to 12, 20 points, and was doing it while like hurt for a decent amount of that. Basically out there with almost one hand. Program legend stuff. I think continually beyond our wildest dreams for what he'd become as a player when he came into this program. Not your best defensive night either. I think you saw U of H's lack of depth. If you want to look at one thing, I think it was most exposed by the way that Goodwin, played for OU. I'm not trying to take anything away from his performance. I mean, it's the guy who's number one offensive rebounder in the country, and I think OU after that game should look into making him more a part of what they do offensively. But and credit to Bobby, he knows this while we were texting during the game. It felt like the Cougar bigs weren't playing as aggressive against Goodwin and the other OU bigs because, oh yeah, you literally have three healthy scholarship big men at this point, three healthy-ish, I guess, in Lonnie Roberts' case. I mean, you could go back and look at this game and also find a number of possessions where the Cougs could have defended better, but I also thought OU looked like a team playing an immensely important game against the number one team in the country, which is to say, I think a team playing out of its skin. So I think that was a part of it as well. And I'm glad you shouted out Damian Dunn among many others. I know there's that one play where he travels as U of H's lead was kind of unraveling down a stretch, and you just saw Sampson just like want to rip off his polo shirt in anger. But I think of all the rotation guys we have left, I think he needed a game where his shots were falling. He needed to get that confidence back, and I think this game was a positive step in the right direction there.
Yeah, I'm glad to circle back on something you said early on there. I'm glad you mentioned about Houston being an offensive team because that is something, and I understand. it somewhat because, like you said, this team does go through
They do.
some cold stretches, and it's just never going to be your stronger side of the ball. So when you are, just clearly the best team in the country defensively, you can only be worse than that offensively. So it's easy to look down on that side of the court. But yeah, I mean, KenPom, the 13th best offensive team in the country. I mean, that's very good. That's very good. We got some really talented offensive players. Would I love for them to be a little bit more consistent? Sure. Would I love for Houston to shoot a little bit higher percentage so you don't have to rely on, turnovers and rebounds to have a shot edge? Like, sure. But is this still a really good offensive team that, as much as, yeah, they go on some cold stretches every game, they also go on some hot stretches pretty much every game. And when you go on some hot stretches offensively while you're playing defense, maybe the UCF game aside, or the Oklahoma game aside, you're playing defense at such a high level that that's why you have such a gaudy record this year. That's why you've only lost 3 games, through 29 games this season. It's not just defense, it's defense and a really high level offense as well. And yeah, you kind of mentioned, I mean, LJ Cryer just really, I know early on this in the year, some people were kind of wanting to see some more from him, and I think he's really stepped up. And like you said, he's not going to do it every game, but he has really carried so much of the scoring load that Houston has needed him to carry. And I know it's easier maybe to fall in love with guys that spend 3-4 years in your program, but I mean, even some of the really good scoring guards that have come through this program that have done that had some games where they had off nights, and they had some games where they really went off and really carried the team. And that's I think similar to what we've seen from LJ, who just feels like he's getting better as the season goes on. And this game you mentioned Wani, and I wanted to circle back to him as well because I think Jamal Shead has kind of been the archetypal guy where you go, like, oh, Jamal Shead's just not going to let us lose this game. Jamal Shead's just not going to let us lose. There's been so many moments this year where it's just like, oh yeah, and even this game where Jamal Shead hit the game winner, it kind of was excuse me, Jamal Shead not wanting to let Houston win. But man, yeah, Juwan Roberts absolutely willed Houston to this victory as much as anybody did in this game as well. And really, that's something that we've seen from him a lot this year. And kind of like you mentioned, which just he continues to just add more and more levels and layers to his game. With each, not even with each season, it seems like within each passing month within a season, he just continues to get better and better as a player. You just hear the coaches rave about how coachable he is and how he just never has bad days, and it's so evident from the way that he plays, that the team responds to him. And it's just been so awesome seeing him go from over the years in this program kind of being in said Lott's position of being the freshman playing a few minutes here and there, and then all of a sudden being just one of the more dynamic players in the best conference in college basketball.
I'm kind of wish casting here. It's sort of there's some parallels. There's some differences too, but it sort of reminds me of Ramon Walker's freshman season in 21-22 when Tremont Mark and Marcus Sasser went down. I was like, all right, it's all hands on deck here, Ramon Walker, who I think the staff had planned on redshirting.
Yeah.
Like we need you here, bud. And hopefully, as I say, if we have anything like a comparable season from Walker's freshman season to what Lott does here down the stretch, I think that would just be true manna from heaven situation. I think my last thought, it wasn't easy or pretty, but continuing to beat the dead horse that I think we beat every week in this podcast, there are no Big 12 teams on this year's schedule or really out there, I think, period, who are bad enough that a true road win will be an easy or pretty affair. Maybe West Virginia this year, but even that, I don't think it's a long-term thing as they, get an actual coach who's going to be there long-term next year and, rise to what they've been on the historical average. And I can't remember who, and if it was you, the person that did this, DM me and I will give you credit the next episode. But someone after the game on Twitter said this game reminded him of the 22 overtime win at Wichita State, where it felt like so many things were working against you, and yet you found a way to win a hugely important road conference game. I think that's important. Like the challenges aren't over, but I think that was a big win that allowed you to remain in the driver's seat for the Big 12 regular season title, and I think showed if anyone needed to see it, proof of how gutsy this group of guys truly are.
Yeah. So that game means as Iowa State keeps winning games as well. So that game, the win for Houston means that they continue to have a 1-game lead over the Cyclones with 2 games left in the regular season. We'll see them play next tomorrow night at UCF on Wednesday. And because you got that 1-game lead with 2 games to go, Houston will be heading to Orlando knowing that a win would guarantee them at least a share of the Big 12 regular season title in their first year in the league. And yeah, facing a Knights team that opened Big 12 play 3-3 with wins over Kansas and UT and at UT Austin, but they've gone just 3-7 since then, including 2 losses to Cincinnati and a double-digit loss at West Virginia a couple of weeks ago, which is the Mountaineers' only win in their last 8 games. I certainly wouldn't say that UCF isn't good enough to pull the upset, especially with, like we're talking about, Houston's bench being as short as it is at this point. But I think that the reason why Ken Palm sees this as a double-digit road win for the Cougars, and the reason why I have a hard time getting too scared about this game, is I just don't really see where the Knights are going to score enough points to win this one. They're a bad offensive team. They don't make shots and they turn the ball over. They're ranked worse than 250 in both effective field goal percentage and turnover percentage offensively. There's a reason why they needed an insanely generous second half whistle to even get to 42 points when these teams played in the Fertitta Center. And in their most recent game, I will say they did give Iowa State a late scare in Orlando. In their most recent game before losing by 8 points, but even that one, and again against an Iowa State team that I think is pretty comparable to Houston defensively. Of any Big 12 team is the one that you'd use as the comparison, the analog to Houston. In that game, UCF only scored 52 points at home in 66 possessions. So I think we can get into some reasons why there you can't totally write off UCF, but even with not wanting to get too cocky and with a lot on the line, this UCF team is so bad offensively. It still just does get a little bit difficult to see Houston, conceding enough points to lose the game.
You're gonna make me make the positive case for UCF here. I mean,
I've got a bunch of bullet points and counter to everything I just said.
I do.
So I'm going to support you. I'm going to support that as well. I think they've got a chance, but Houston feels like a comfortable favorite for a reason.
This is one of the things I love about college basketball. I've said this on here at least a couple times before. When a team is just either just really terrible at one aspect and really good at the other, like Iowa is the kind of flip side of the coin of UCF. They've at least recently been like a really good offensive team and just like well outside the top 100 defensively. Iowa State has now, I think, become a more balanced team, but a couple years prior to this under Otzelberger, they're very much just the absolute barest minimum of offense to win basketball games. And 179th in offensive efficiency, 10th in defensive efficiency. A little bit of a difference there. But I will say one thing they do quite well, and one thing that really scares me as we have 8 healthy rotation players for this UH team, is that not only are they a good defensive team, I think kind of like we've talked about, but they're really good at getting to the free throw line. It's really one of the 2 things they do well offensively. Like they're a pretty good offensive rebound team, not elite, but I would say definitionally well above average, and really good at getting to the free throw line, which you kind of touched on with the amount of times they got to it when these teams faced last at the Fertitta Center. And really, the only reason why they didn't put up a comically, I mean, 42 is bordering on comically small, but the reason why they didn't put up like 29 points because they were shooting at that kind of clip against the Cougars, but just like you said, got kind of a generous second half whistle when these teams first miss. That's what really scares me is that we have something kind of similar to what we saw last time against Oklahoma, where one or both of Javier or Wani gets in foul trouble, and you're having to give not just 11 minutes to said lot you gave against Oklahoma, that you have to play said lot 20 or 25 minutes, which God bless him, but probably not something you want to do and feel confident in beating this opponent. I think I generally agree with you. Like, I think you have to be a certain level of offensive team. You don't need to be like a top 25 offensive team, but you have to be a well above average team at scoring the basketball, which I would say Iowa State, TCU, and Kansas, all to different degrees, are to beat this team. And two of those three wins that I just named off were incredibly narrow ones. So I think that is the big hurdle. I do get a little nervous about facing an opponent who already against you this year did a good job at getting to the line and getting fouls called on you when you have dramatically less depth than you did the last time these teams met. But I also just have a hard time seeing, like you, a team that struggles to put the ball in the basket this badly, being able to beat the Cougars. Even when at a home arena, I'm sure they'll have a great crowd there for their senior night and all that stuff. Like, I'm not downplaying any of that. I'm not even gonna say I'm like wildly confident, but I kind of agree with you that I feel like you have to be a certain level of offensive team to beat this Cougar team as good as they are defensively.
I do want to say, like, Sam and I both really like Sedlot. We both think he's going to be a really
Yes.
good player. Would just love for him to get a year or two more of experience under his belt before he's playing big time minutes in March in the Big 12. So, please do not take anything we're saying as a criticism of Sedlot. Houston is that. I mean, even we're talking about Wani. Wani, his true freshman year, we didn't want him playing big minutes like down the stretch either. So that's just kind of the way that it goes with most big men. It doesn't mean he's not a very talented player. It doesn't mean he's not going to be a very great player for us. I think both of those things can be true.
I was gonna say try to remember something JV. I can literally remember one thing Javier Francis did his freshman year, and that was that alley oop dunk as time expired against Tulane that Samson apologized for in that kind of chippy game in New Orleans. That's it.
That's
Because
right.
because he was a guy who needed a couple years of development, like I think Sedlot probably is.
Yeah. But yeah, so to make the affirmative case for UCF here, I mean, their last two home games, a win over Texas Tech by 14 points and a game where they had a late lead against a really good Iowa State team. They play very good defense. They're the only team this year that has come to the Fertitta Center and held Houston under a point per possession at home. And yeah, like kind of we talked about, they're playing in front of what will likely once again be a raucous crowd that is playing the number one team in the country in their final home game of the year with kind of nothing to lose and everything to gain. And yeah, it's entirely possible that I have an inflated sense of invincibility around this Cougar team because they've come out top, on top in a bunch of really close road wins lately. And yeah, you're down to 8 scholarship players. You commit more fouls than the average team, and you can get in trouble real fast. And UCF, like you said, draws an above average number of fouls. So I'm not saying that there are no ingredients for an upset here. But again, maybe it's just recency bias after watching this team overcome so many ingredients for upset against the Sooners. But I just don't see Jamal Shead and Juwan Roberts letting this team lose to UCF with a Big 12 title on the line. They just faced a worst case scenario on Saturday in Norman against a better team than UCF and still found a way to win. If we lose, I promise I'll never get chesty in a game preview ever again. But I don't see Houston losing this. I think we're gonna go out and get the Big 12 title, Sam.
Yeah, I think we agree on that one.
All right. And then Houston's final game of the regular season will be hosting the Kansas Jayhawks on Saturday afternoon. Houston ending the regular season with a rematch against the only team to beat them this year in a non-down-to-the-wire fashion. KU, despite that positive result, has had an uncharacteristically rough go of it in the Big 12 this year, much to my just eternal sadness. They are hosting Kansas State as we speak, but they entered today on a 2-game losing streak, taking a home loss to BYU and losing to actually they haven't started the K-State game yet, but they will play this evening. But yeah, 2-game losing streak coming in. Losses at home to BYU and then a loss at Baylor, dropping them to 9-7 in Big 12 play in a 3-way tie for 4th place. And they've also been allergic to road wins this year. They are just 2-6 away from Allen Fieldhouse in the Big 12 play, including losses to non-NCAA tournament teams UCF, West Virginia, and Kansas State. But as much as Houston's home success and Kansas's road woes should maybe make me feel confident, And Ken Palm, it's funny. Ken Palm actually predicts, I think, gives
It's a
UCF a
10-point win, right?
2%, also 10% win, gives actually UCF a 2% higher chance of winning with the game being in Orlando than Kansas with the game being at Houston. But man, this one still scares me. The thought of, just the Jayhawks combination of size and passing ability, I think made them offensively the toughest matchup that Houston's defense has seen this year. And again, not dumping on the guy, but the idea that Hunter Dickinson might be by necessity playing some minutes going up against said lot in this one, like the guy a lot, but that scares me. Kevin McCullough also appears to be back healthy again. He's been kind of in the lineup, out of the lineup, in the lineup, out of the lineup. He's missed 5 of their last 9 games, including 2 of their worst losses they've had down the stretch. The blowout loss at Lubbock, in Lubbock, and then the home loss to BYU, both games that McCullough wasn't there for, but played 31 minutes in their most recent game. So I don't know. Maybe I hate the idea that it's even a possibility that Kansas might have a chance to give Houston their only home loss of the year, beat us twice, ruin what would otherwise be a really big party to end the regular season at the Fertitta Center, drop Houston potentially into only a tie for the Big 12 title. Man, it would just be one big bummer in what has otherwise been a just dream come true of a regular season for Houston. So maybe it's just like the potential out there, but I don't know. I think it's that, and I think watching how easily Kansas scored points against us in Allen Fieldhouse, that still has me nervous, despite how bad they've looked on the road and how good we've looked at home.
Don't disagree with anything you said, really. I will just point out it has just been an insane gulf between how they've played in Lawrence and how they've played in true road environments this year. Like, yes, Kevin McCullough's out for that game at Texas Tech, and obviously I think that would be a lot closer of a game, but I don't think Kevin McCullough's making up the entire, I think, 29-point deficit there, and that they have lost some whoppers with Kevin McCullough in the lineup. Though, again, I think worth singling him out because I think he was Kansas's best player, him or Furphy, when these teams originally met in Lawrence, and I think the really scary thing is just it's facing a team with a lot of length and an ability to score the basketball like Kansas. I mean, saw it for most of 40 minutes a game in Lawrence. We'll say if they're not feeling like that offensively, as bad as the game in Lawrence went at times, the Cougars did turn the Jayhawks over a bunch. If they're not in that level of offensive rhythm that we saw at Fog Allen Fieldhouse, which again, like it's a lot of data points that this team just does not play as well offensively, defensively, all of it when they're not playing in Lawrence. You have that with the Cougs' ability that we've seen very, very consistently to turn the opponents over. I think the Cougars have a pretty good chance this one. I mean, being 1-6 in Big 12 road games when you're Kansas and you had a team that was one, 2-6. My bad. Sorry to take that second one away from it. 2-6 in Big 12 road games when you're Kansas and you have a team that was rightfully in the conversation for being the preseason number 1. It's still kind of hard to figure out, even with McCullough's injury, I think playing a big part there. Johnny Furphy, who I mentioned a bit ago, was really coming into his own when these teams met last. I think he's cooled down a bit recently, but is still a scary matchup problem. And you could tell last time the amount of length that Kansas was able to throw at the Cougars was a big problem. And don't think missing JoJo Tugler in the front court is going to improve the situation. Don't love the idea of any amount of said lot against Hunter Dickinson, one of the, I think, most uniquely skilled big men in college basketball. I mean, and if anything, since these teams last met, Kansas has become even more reliant on Dickinson. He scored 20 points in 3 of the Jayhawks' last 4 games. And yeah, I know Fertitta will be rocking for this game. I'm sure this Cougar team wants some vengeance for that first game went Lawrence, and personally can't wait to be there for it, even if the prospect of Kansas basketball does make me a little nervous.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like in the road game, you saw that Bill Self had a really good game plan offensively in terms of, especially early on, getting the ball to Hunter Dickinson, getting him the ball where it was hard for Houston to kind of double him without, just giving him enough time to look right over top of.
It was like their first 3 or 4 possessions they went to him, right?
Yeah. They just went to him, and then it created such a sense of gravity around him that I thought it really opened up the floor for a lot of the other guys to get a lot of open shots, which kind of led to Kansas having that whatever insane 68%, whatever it is that they shot from the field in that game. So you mentioned, even despite you say, okay, well, they can, they have all the size and passing ability, so they can just throw right over Houston's traps. But you made a good point also as well, that Houston did end up forcing a lot of turnovers in that game, but you can only force them into turnovers. If they're making 2/3 of their shots, you're probably not going to win. So, I thought Bill Self had a really good game plan for this one. And, Kelvin Sampson is a Hall of Fame coach. He's going to not, the same game plan that Kansas ran last time is not going to, I don't think, work as well this time around. But Bill Self is a Hall of Fame coach too. He is someone who is, going to have a counter punch to the punch that he threw the first time. So should be a lot of fun. Should be just an absolute rocking Fertitta Center. And like you said, just hoping and praying and holding out all hope that Kansas continues to look like the Kansas that has played on the road in Big 12 play. All right, moving along. Did want to mention Cougar swimming and diving, who finished in second place at Big 12 championships this past week. And this was a literal best case scenario for Houston, as we knew coming into the year that UT Austin is operating on a different plane of existence than the rest of the conference in swimming and diving. And that is, of course, how it did turn out, with the Longhorns comfortably winning the team championship. But we also knew that the second tier of the conference was ripe for the taking. And we have said since at least last summer that we thought Houston had a really good chance to take second place and plant their flag as the team to beat, at least among returning programs next year. And they did just that. The Longhorns, like I said, finished first with 2,092 points, but the Cougs came in second at 1,266 and a half. TCU was a close third at 1,215 and a half, with nobody else clearing 1,000 points. So, with the Longhorns pretty much dominating all of the podiums, there weren't too many podium finishes for Houston. Their best individual finish came from freshman Michelle McLeod, who finished third in the platform dive. Also in the diving events, Chase Ferris finished fifth in the 1 meter springboard. And then Ferris, McLeod, and Hedda Grells combined to take third in the team diving competition to pick up some big points for the Cougars. And then, Houston had some strong swimming events as well. The Cougs got 4 of the 8 swimmers in the A final of the 200-yard butterfly, something that if you listened to my season preview, I circled as an event to watch for the Cougs. They were led by sophomore Alondra Ortiz, who finished 4th in that event. Ortiz also took 6th in the 400 individual medley. Some other strong swimming events, we saw junior Henrietta Fongley take 4th in the 100-yard breaststroke. And then the team took 4th in the 400-yard medley relay. So, yes, like I said, I do realize that after winning 7 conference titles in a row, it's not as exciting to see Houston finish 7th and not have too many podium finishes. Second, sorry. So I got my 7s and my second confused there. Finish second and not have too many podium finishes. And to see the podium, like I said, broadly dominated by Burnt Orange, but, it is what it is. And with Houston's most of Houston's big point scorers in this one having eligibility left, with the way that Tanika Jameson has shown the ability to go out and recruit instant impact athletes. This feels like a very strong foundation to build on for next year, when you no longer have that crazy dominant force at the top of the conference.
Yeah, I think that's what made this development cycle so exciting, is especially the couple championships prior to this one, your last couple years competing in the American, is that you weren't gonna, the timeline was gonna line up to where, oh, okay, like one, that we have nothing but impact upper class, basically that you don't have impact underclassmen, which is not the case. Like you said, one of our few podium finishers was an underclassman. That that you're not lining up to the one season where you're facing off against I would say swimming and diving's most consistent college powerhouse, to where you can now in the future non-Longhorn Big 12 actually potentially compete for a title beyond this year. I know it technically breaks that streak of, what was it, 6 or, I should have written this in my notes, was it 6 or 7 straight in the American? Seven straight. I know it technically breaks that streak, but it almost feels like this is going to be, when we talk about the U of H first season in the Big 12, this is going to be one of those big accomplishments we talk about, along with whatever men's basketball ends up doing, volleyball, and what they did and so on. Like, this is a really, really good achievement. I cannot underline that enough. And I think, not that we needed it, because I mean, you're coming off 2 straight conference titles. I think Tanika Jameson and shown herself able to follow up what Ryan Wakamerka started here before he left for Auburn. But I think this is proof positive that you weren't just competing, and this is not me intent. Like, I formed this in my head, and I was like, I'm not trying to do a swimming and diving pun here, but this isn't just you competing in a more shallow pool. Like, this is a team capable of competing against Big 12 competition. This is a team that I think in 12 months time, not calling my shot here necessarily or putting pressure on, but I think a team that would not be at all surprised if in 12 months on this pod, we're talking about a Big 12 conference title.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have competition. Arizona State coming in number 21, I believe, in the top 25 at the moment. So that's a strong team there as well. But like I said, with a lot of really strong athletes coming back, if Jameson keeps recruiting, at the level or at a higher level than she has up until this point, then I think Houston's going to be really, really competitive, even with some of those teams coming in. So going forward, we'll have diving zones starting on actually not this. I was thinking it was this coming Monday, but it is this coming Monday. I'm correct. Um, this coming Monday, March the 11th, and then a couple weeks after that. We should also this week find out who which swimmers qualify. It's hard to know. Swimming's a little more complicated with the way that qualifying goes with the A cuts and the B cuts and filling things out. So we'll see. It should be in the next couple of days. We'll see if Houston gets any swimmers qualified for NCAA championships and then diving zones after that. But already with the conference meet feeling pretty good. And speaking of NCAA champion, excuse me. Speaking of NCAA championships, Cougar Track and Field will be competing at NCAA Indoor Track and Field Championships this weekend. The Cougars will have 5 events on the men's side, 2 on the women's side. For the men, Sean Maswangani will be competing in the 60-meter and 200-meter dashes. Devian Wilson will be competing in the 60 hurdles. Christian Sampe will be competing in the pole vault, and then Grant Levesque competing in the heptathlon. For the women, Kellyanne Beckford competing in the 800 meters, and the Cougs as a team will be competing in the 4x400 relay as well. And, 5 on the men's side, 2 on the women's side. Even on the men's side, when you got 5, really not enough entrants to do too much damage in the team standings, although the Houston men are currently ranked 10th nationally as a team, and I do think that they have a great chance to finish in the top 10. And that's largely because there's really none of their 5 events on the men's side that really all 7. There's none of the 7 events that they're in there would I bet against them scoring points. I think they've got every reason to think that they're going to do well. Wilson, number 2 nationally right now in the 60 hurdles. Levesque, number 4 nationally in the heptathlon. Sampe, number 5 in the pole vault. And Sean is quote unquote only, number 7 in the 200 and number 11 in the 60, but, almost no separation between the top group and the 60. And while there are 3 guys that are kind of, a cut ahead of everybody else in the 200, there's also every reason to think that Sean will be nipping at their heels at the very least. And I mean, the last time we saw him go to an NCAA championship event, it was outdoors last year, and he had, kind of a career day running a 991 100 meters and a sub 20-second 200. Just a crazy performance there. So hopefully we'll see more of that kind of performance from Sean and Houston doing well in the team scores. Hopefully scoring in 4 or 5 of their 5 men's events. And then on the women's side too, I think lots of reason to think that Houston can score points. Beckford's time at Big 12 championships that got her qualified in the 800 is the 3rd best time in the country this year. The Cougars are also the 7th fastest school thus far this year in the 4x4 relay. So, the top 8 score points, and that's 2 really good chances, I think, for the women to score as well. And, the Cougar women haven't scored any points at NCAA indoor or outdoor championships either of the past 2 seasons. So, very much hoping to see them, kind of continue their inaugural Big 12 journey this year with some team points.
Yeah, just only would add a couple things that you said. Like, obviously, Maswanyani's top performances this year are 11th and 7th in the 2 events he's in, respectively. But we're also talking about a veteran guy, a guy who's shown an ability to perform in these kinds of events. This won't be his first time with the pressure of a college championship. And like you said, with Wilson, Levesque, and Sampe all being top 5 performers in their respective events, like, yeah, very, very easy to see all of them scoring. Kellyanne Beckford as well. I mean, really, the only event, men's and women's side, where you need to overachieve a little bit to get in the points would be the 4x4. And frankly, I don't think that's a crazy thought, which is it's pretty cool. I mean, you want as many qualifiers as possible, us as fans of the Cougs, but it's not like you had a bunch of, your relay and your individuals all scraped in. Like they were all like near the top performers, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, you didn't have a bunch of 15th and 16th place performers.
15th and 16th, really, you're still like one of the most incredible athletes, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, you're still a phenomenal athlete. You still have earned your way to the NCAA championships at that point. But yeah, when you've got almost every event that you're qualified for, you're in the top 8, and you would expect to score some points. That's really exciting, and hope to see those athletes perform really well this weekend. Going to be talking some women's hoops next, and before we talked men's hoops, we had some kind of bad news up front on the health front. This time around, we've got some really
bad news on the vibes front.
Yeah,
my bad. Sorry. I know I completely
some very good news is what Sam meant to say. We got some really good news in that we're happy to hear that recent Cougar women's basketball alum Julia Blackshell Fair announced this week that her cancer had gone into remission. Obviously, that was something that was really scary from a really, young person who had just been such a vibrant personality and such a tremendously talented player for this Cougar basketball program. So obviously, more than any sports results, just really, really happy for her to see that this week, and wishing her nothing but the best, of course, going forward.
Yeah, just wonderful player to watch, and just like such a scary thing when someone so young gets that diagnosis. And I think stuff like that is news like that is really cool. It really, I think it centers us and makes us realize like, yeah, we don't like the losses, we love the wins, but this is the kind of stuff that's like really important in life. And I think outshines any of the quote unquote bad news we talk about in terms of stuff that's on court and on field. Like that, the wins and losses pale in comparison so much to someone like Julie Blackshell being able to live her life, hopefully healthy and cancer free for the rest of it from this point.
Absolutely. So in terms of the on the court stuff, the Cougs did have their last two games of the regular season this past week. I think the BYU game was what was kind of like as we were recording. It's hard to not record. It's hard to record in the evening and not have it be while there's some sports going on. I think the BYU game was kind of like that. But yeah, ultimately a 64-54 loss for Houston. The Cougars fell behind 18-9 at the end of the first quarter. Made a couple of runs in the second and third quarters to kind of make it a close game, but BYU always responded. And by the fourth quarter, the Cougs with a U had this one comfortably salted away. So, yes, it's a road game, but, double-digit loss to a BYU team that had lost over two-thirds of their Big 12 games coming in. Still not the kind of performance you probably want to see. Cougars not named, Houston Cougars, I should say. Houston Cougars not named Layla Blair and Malia Johnson shot a combined 8 of 35 in this one. Just not a performance that's going to get it done against, lower half of the Big 12 team.
Yeah, I think what really stood out to me beyond all of what you said is that you never led at any point in regulation, even early on in this one. Like that's tough. And once again, the offense outside of maybe an individual here or there really was just completely went missing in this one. And I think it's just too many times that we've talked about a game from this team, and that's kind of been the general description that we said is that the offense went completely missing for large stretches, and you just lost by 10. And again, BYU's been noticeably better at home than away, and they're the best of the four newcomers, but not the best by that much. It would have been really nice if nothing else in this difficult season to have at least gotten that, and unfortunately did not.
Yeah, so that game set up the season finale at home versus UCF to be the battle to avoid the cellar. UCF came into this one 3-14 in Big 12 play. Houston was 4-13, so a loss would have seen Houston tie for last place and have the lowest seed at the Big 12 tournament, having lost the tiebreaker to the Knights there. But mission no last place finishes continues successfully for now. Women's basketball won't be the team to mess that up, but they certainly made it pretty interesting. UCF's only lead through the first three quarters was at 4-2, with the Cougars leading pretty much the rest of the way. It went on a big run in the kind of early to mid third quarter to push the lead as high as 21 points at 56-35 with 3 minutes left.
And everything went
quarter.
smoothly from there, right?
And it was a comfortable finish after there. No, the Knights scored the all 8 points to finish out the third quarter to pull within 13 heading into the fourth, and they continue that run. What ultimately, over about 8 or 9 minutes of basketball, was a 25-2 run by UCF. You talk about the offense going AWOL for stretches. Houston got 2 points via free throws in what was otherwise a 25-0 Knights run that turned a 21-point deficit for UCF into a 2-point lead with just over 5 minutes left. The Knights would lead by as many as 5 at the 2-minute mark remaining in the fourth quarter, but Layla Blair hit a huge three to cut the lead to 2. Houston got a steal from Logan McNeil on the other end. They turned that into a three-pointer by Nia Boyd to take the lead, and Houston was able to successfully defend UCF's final two possessions and get the 68-67 win to Sam. Avoid last place in the Big 12. There haven't been a whole lot of exciting things to talk about with women's basketball this year, and I do realize that not finishing in last place is setting the bar about as low as you possibly can. But the Cougs did clear that bar and did not finish in last. So that is not a lot, but it is something.
it just blows my mind that UH went from having a 21-point lead to being down 67-62 at about the 2 minute mark left in regulation. Takes a lot of doing. It takes a lot of both
25
not
to 2.
25 to, it takes both a lot of not defending very well and also just not putting the ball in the basket, which I think fortunately has been too common. Though really happy that a couple of the 8 seniors that got honored in this game, Layla Blair and Nia Boyd, were the ones that ultimately got the Cougar win over the finish line. Just really glad Blair specifically, a great player and representative of herself and the university, got this win in what could be her final game at the Fertitta Center. I know she was one of the athletes honored at senior night, though I think she could have a fifth season because her career started during the 2020-21 season. And yay, we're not DFL in the Big 12 standings, which again, like I think there's one sport we talk about later that might be the one that breaks that. But at least on March 5th, 2024 at 7:36 Central Time, U of H has not finished dead last in a Big 12 sport yet.
Yeah, so the Cougs will continue their season in Kansas City for the Big 12 tournament on Thursday evening. They'll be playing Texas Tech. As I mentioned, Houston finished 5-13, which actually put them in a three-way tie for 11th place in the Big 12 standings alongside Cincinnati and the Red Raiders, but the Cougs came out worst in the tiebreaker, so they are the 13 seed. They'll face the 12 seed Texas Tech in the first round, with the winner advancing to play 5 seed Baylor on Friday. And the Red Raiders, you may remember, faced Houston twice this year, got the win in Houston in, I think Houston's second or third Big 12 game.
It was the opener, actually.
Oh, was it the, okay, you're right. And then the Red Raiders as well blew out the Cougars in Lubbock. So 5-13, but two pretty comfortable victories over the Cougs for two of those 5 wins. So not a tough matchup right away for Houston. And then, even then, you win that one, you're facing a Baylor team that blew you out twice. So likely to be a relatively short Big 12 tournament run for Houston, Sam.
I would say if the Cougs have anything going in their favor in this one, I think it's really kind of twofold. One, Tech's coming into this one on a 9-game losing streak, in that losses to not that great Cincy, UCF, and Oklahoma State teams in there. I believe the Cincy loss and UCF losses were both in Lubbock as well. Those were all teams that U of H was able to beat this year. Although the Lady Raiders did have a surprisingly close 5-point loss to a very, very good Longhorn team. But I think my second point, and it kind of sounds cliched, I know, but it is hard to beat a team 3 times in one season. I probably wouldn't be breaking out this cliche if we were playing Baylor, K-State, or the Longhorns, even Iowa State either. But I don't think I'm being too optimistic to say that the Cougs can beat a team that's mired in a long losing streak, who has the same conference record as you, on a neutral court, who you've gotten to see a couple times before. So there we go, Dustin. I'm generally, I feel like, kind of negative about where this program is right now, but that is my attempt at positivity, because I definitely think the Cougars can win this one. But I also agree with you that if you do, Baylor is going to be a very, very difficult second round matchup. One that I cannot weave a positive spin for how the Cougars are going to win that one.
Yeah, we kind of talked about clearing the low bar of not finishing last. Would love to. Well, I'm glad that they did that. I would be very glad if they finished the low bar of, not being one of 2 teams to get eliminated on the first day of the Big 12 tournament. That'd be nice, but we'll see. And with Houston's season, barring the greatest sports miracle of my lifetime, coming to an end in this coming week, I think that's worth asking. Before the time I should say, when we come back next week for our next episode, will Ron Huey be the head coach of the women's basketball team at the University of Houston? Sam, I have some thoughts here, but I know you do too. So before I get into them, I'll just go ahead and throw you that question to play with.
So quick clarification. Are you asking what do I think will happen, or what would I do if I was in the athletic director's chair?
I know what you would do. So I'm gonna ask you the question I have any doubt about whatsoever, and that is, what do you think will happen?
I mean, I because I think you know what my answer is going to be to what I would do. I think Pesman keeps him around because I've not seen any indication that he gives a shit about women's sports beyond sending out a nice tweet whenever they do something well. I mean, we've had some hits. Obviously, like, he hired David Rare, and David Rare came on here and said, I don't think dishonestly that Pesman and his team are a big part of the success he's had at the University of Houston. But I don't know, man. Like, he's been the athletic director here for 6 years, and there's been like, this is not me like winding up to say like this guy sucks, let's get rid of this guy, even though I've been, I think, critical of Chris Pesman here before. But Dustin, you know the answer to this. The one time U of H has let go a coach that was not the football coach under Chris Pesman was when they basically had no choice to do it when Caddy Platt was in NCAA trouble. Like I think if Caddy Platt hadn't gotten in NCAA trouble, Dustin, they would have kept her. I don't know if they would have kept her the following 5 seasons, but we wouldn't have David Rare here in the timeline that we had him if Caddy Platt hadn't gotten a little fast and loose with the players volunteering for her summer camps and getting in NCAA trouble there. Like that's, I'm just basing this on history here. And he hasn't, as much as I think it's not what I would do, I haven't seen any indication that he's actually going to hold someone outside of he/the U of H athletics and university leadership are going to hold somebody accountable for poor on-court results outside of or on-field results outside of a football coach or two.
I hear what you're saying. I don't necessarily disagree, but I actually
It's not what I would do.
I know, I know it's not, but I am going to disagree with you. I'm going to go ahead. I'll stake out the position. Ron Huey is not going to be around for next by this time next week. And we did see obviously Pesman make a move with regards to Dana. And yes, obviously you're under a lot more pressure as the AD to let a guy go, even if you like him, when he's the football coach than when he's the women's basketball coach, because there's just not as much pressure associated with that program. And like you said, thus far, you're absolutely right that he has responded to the lack of pressure around non-revenue sports by letting coaches hang around. And it's, I don't know, but I still feel like he kind of gave coaches like Ron Huey and maybe Kristen Vesely of the softball program as well, despite the troubles of those programs. I think, and maybe this is just me putting narratives out there that don't exist, I feel like Pesman wanted to give them a shot in the Big 12. He wanted, as much as I think there's every reason to like both of those coaches as people. I think both of those coaches have had some success here at Houston. It's not like we've never had any level of success. Obviously, we haven't gotten to the NCAA tournament under Coach Huey, but had some teams that were right there that did well in the NIT, made the NIT, and Vesley's had some success as well early on in her tenure. So, I think it's a bad idea. It probably was a bad idea to let either of them come back. I think I would have ideally loved to see us giving a new coach a fresh slate heading into year one in either of those sports. But I think it was at least semi-defensible, maybe, and it's in a way that it just isn't to give a guy there's just something about saying a decade of 0 NCAA tournament appearances that I think is hard to look anyone in the face, even the relatively small number of people who care about the Houston Cougar women's basketball program, if we're being kind of brutally honest. If you're going to continue to field a team, I think bringing a guy back for year 11 when he's made 0 NCAA tournament appearances is one of those things that is just going to be a bridge too far, even for a guy like Pesman, who I have no doubt really likes Ron Huey as a person, because how could you not? How could anyone not like Ron Huey as a person? It's damn near impossible.
Could not be, like, the times he had him, could not be a nicer, more accommodating, like a good, engaging interview guy. I have not one iota of a personal beef with Ron Huey.
Based on the 2 times he's been on the podcast, the 1 time I ran into him at a football game, and every public statement he's ever made, with one exception that I'll make here in a little bit, couldn't like Ron Huey more as a person. But you get 10 years, if you get 10 years and you get 0 NCAA tournament appearances, I don't care what sport we're talking about, you've got to make a move. If you're going to continue to sponsor the sport, you've got to make the move. And I think one of the things that did Dana Holgerson in was not just the results, it was some of the stuff that he said. And you heard Dr. Couture specifically say that. She said, hey, the moment that got her on, like, hey, we got to let this guy go, is when he was just like, oh yeah, the ship has sailed in terms of recruiting. And she was just like, it wasn't just that, the thing that on court, it was the comments he's making. And again, everything up until a day or two ago, I would have said that Ron Huey was giving you 0 ammo to, in terms of on the court quotes and stuff, like off the court quotes and stuff. But did tell Chris Gardner this week that the Big 12 conference was, quote, 10 times tougher than he thought it was going to be. You just can't say that, man. Like, you're just making yourself look completely naive and ignorant. That was such a rough quote for me to swallow. And you can go, okay, yeah, and it's fair to be like, okay, well, transitioning to the Big 12 is tough. But I think what we've seen this far, good Houston programs are good. bad Houston programs are bad. Soccer was in a real rough place. They looked rough. Volleyball was in a good place where they didn't go 18-2 or whatever they did in the American
But that
last
was
year.
never going to happen.
We didn't expect them to, but they still look like a good team. They were a good team last year in the American. They were a good team this year in the Big 12. Men's basketball, good team last year in the American, good team this year in the Big 12. Soccer, not a good team last year in the American, not a good team this year in the Big 12. Swimming and diving, good team last year in the American, good team this year in the Big 12.
Football, not going to do the Big 12.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, it's just like, yes, there is certainly a step up in level in competition, but we haven't seen any of the programs that have made the transition thus far turn into wildly different teams. He was not putting together a good AAC team, as evidenced by the fact that he went to 0 NCAA tournaments in 9 years in the American. And it looks like a team that wasn't ready for the Big 12. And when you go out and explicitly say as much, you weren't ready because the conference was 10 times harder than you thought it was going to be, man, you might as well just wave a big flag that says, please fire me at this point. And that is why I've come around to, I'm scared to have any hope about this women's basketball program because it's been so long. It's been so long since I was up in Waco watching this team in the NCAA tournament 13 years ago that it's just hard to have any optimism about this program whatsoever. But I really feel like Pesman's going to have no choice but to make a move here.
Yeah, and I think you said most of what I was saying. I think an especially damning quote because like I know this hasn't been a Big 12 program, but you've been coaching in this footprint for a decade. You've been I'm sure like recruiting players who ended up with Big 12 program or nothing else like recruiting players who are playing. It's like, oh yeah, like we're recruiting so and so who's playing in AAU against this young woman who's going to be going to Texas or Baylor. Like you have an idea, and he coached. I mean, it's been many years, but this is a guy who coaches an assistant in the Big 12 and ACC before he came here. So like Ron Huey knows what a good women's basketball conference or a better one than the American looks like. He's coached in it, for a good amount of time before taking this job, which I think is just kind of making it kind of damning, hard to defend quote, even more damning and hard to defend.
All right, well let's talk some bat and ball sports, starting with the Cougar baseball team that had a wild 1-2 weekend at Minute Maid Park, and the one that got away was Friday's game against Texas State. Although I guess it's one of those games that whoever lost it was going to say that. Unfortunately, it was the Cougars that took the L. Houston went up 2-0 early, then their bats went quiet for a while. Texas State built up a 5-2 lead. The Cougs responded with a 4 spot in the top of the 8th, capped off by a 2-run go-ahead single from Cameron Nickens. But the Bobcats hit a game-tying home run with their leadoff hitter in the bottom of the 9th. Actually had the potential game winner in the bottom of the 9th thrown out at the plate, but the game went to extras. Houston was able to get their free base runner home in the top of the 10th, but the Texas State, for the second inning in a row, had their first batter hit a home run. This one, with your free base runner and extras, was a 2-run home run, and that was the walk-off winner for the Bobcats. So especially after they went on to beat the Longhorns the next day, that was definitely kind of a bummer of a chance that Houston had for what would probably be a pretty good win that kind of slipped through their fingers at the end there.
Yeah, it's just rough to have. I know the UTSA loss before that wasn't a walk off, but rough to have 2 games get away late from you like that. I wanted to shout out Jackson Jelkin has longest outing of the young season, struck out 8 Bobcats in 5 1/3 innings of work. Didn't really get any run support while he was out there, but good to see him kind of gradually extending his starts. Also, I think showing the swing and miss stuff that we had hoped to see before the season. Trey Jones continuing to be an impact guy as well. I think we were optimistic about him coming in from A&M Corpus, but I mean, pretty big jump in competition, but has been, I think, if anything, better than we expected here in the early season. Like you said, Dustin, I think the losing team in this one just wouldn't have felt great about it, and just never like losing in extras though. The Bobcats ended up beating UT the next day. I think looked like a pretty good team. So not like you lost to a bad team, but to feel like you were as close as you were to, lose it that way, it just sucks.
Yeah, then on Saturday, Houston faced one of the top teams in the country in Vanderbilt and got some really solid pitching from Antoine Jean, Paul Schmitz, Kyle Calametto, and Alex Solis, who combined to allow the Commodores to score just 3 runs. Especially good to see Schmitz and Calametto out there, guys we thought were going to be big parts of the rotation, who are clearly kind of warming up into things as they were dealing with some injuries prior to the season. So good to see them both out there. But unfortunately, you held the Commodores to 3 runs, but only got 1 on the other end against a really elite pitching staff, and still, unfortunately, took the L.
Yeah, I think not that you had a ton of opportunities, and like you said, you were going against a really good opponent, but I think the ones that really stick in your craw, the missed opportunities you had in the second and sixth inning, you had left multiple runners on base in both of those. Even acknowledging this is a really good opponent, you felt like you might have had a chance to get like a big signature win there. I don't think anything about this specific game would have disappointed me unless like the Cougars had lost by just a really gaudy margin, and the fact that this was conceivably pretty close late, I think it's not bad news. It was nice to see, like you said, Schmitz and LaCalametto out there. It's slightly less nice that Schmitz walked three batters in 2/3 of an inning out there, but again, still a guy working his way back. Not actually, don't have any real long-term concerns about that. I'm glad you mentioned Alex Solis. Bit of a step up in competition from high school ball to facing one of the sport's most consistent powers at an MLB stadium, and I thought the moment definitely didn't look too big for Solis. Hopefully, he's able to cement himself as somebody worth going to high leverage as the staff kind of figures out here in the early season who's worth going to in those high leverage spots out of the bullpen. Something I don't know if they've entirely figured out yet, but yeah, though unfortunately, much as all the mitigating stuff we said about this being a very very good opponent, being a game where you competed, it's still your second loss in as many games at Minute Maid, which can put a lot of pressure on what ended up being a very eventful game on Sunday night against the Raging Cajuns.
I was gonna say, if the Friday night against Texas State sounded kind of wild, it had nothing on the Sunday game against Louisiana Lafayette. Houston opened things up with a 3-run home run early on from Jonathan French, but UL Lafayette pulled within 4-2 pretty quickly, then put up a 4-run bottom of the sixth to take a 2-run lead, only for Justin Murray to then hit a bases clearing double in the next half inning to give Houston a 7-6 lead. Only for ULL to then immediately tie it up in the next half inning, the bottom of the seventh, only for Jonathan French to then retake the lead for Houston, then half inning after that with an RBI single in the top of the eighth. Finally got a scoreless frame from each team, but for the second time this weekend, Houston gave up the game-tying run in the ninth, bottom of the ninth inning, this time after they had gotten 2 outs with nobody on in the bottom of the ninth as well. In the 10th inning, neither team was able to score their ghost runner, sending us to the 11th. And then in the top of the 11th, Houston strung a ton of hits together, put up a 5 spot to take a big lead, which was good because they needed it, because the Raging Cajuns immediately hit a 2-run home run in the bottom of the 11th, would actually end up getting the tying run to the plate in that inning. But Tim Williamson, Harvard transfer who had only made 2 previous appearances as a Cougar, and both of them went pretty poorly, comes in, strikes out 3 of the 4 batters that he faced to end this game and get Houston a 13-10 win that it felt like they really needed, both because it's, I don't know how good ULL is this year. They've looked kind of iffy, so it might be not a great win, but still probably Houston's best win on the year. Snapped that 4-game losing streak and avoided the 0 for at Minute Maid Park to improve to 7-4 on the year. So yeah, would have loved for that one to be a little bit less dramatic, but ultimately a win's a win, and just happy to get at least a 1-2 effort at Minute Maid.
Yeah, I think obviously we would have preferred more than one win this weekend, but on the heels of 3 straight losses going back to that midweeker against UTSA, it was just nice to see the Cougs close out a win against I think an opponent that's going to be at least decent this year. I think it's fair to ask how decent, how quality of an opponent, but someone who's been at least like fairly good. And I think just again getting what feels like this program's first win in ages at a Minute Maid event. Like I think that's pretty cool. I wanted to shout out. I mean, Justin Murray, monster game. Which I'm sure he wishes he had like 1 or 2 pitches back in the ninth inning, but gave you just about everything someone could give you at the plate. I thought Duncan Howard did a solid, not like spectacular, but a solid job in the start there as well. I wanted to also shout out Ryan Dollar. Did a good job in relief, really limited the damage in that 7th inning where I think I could have blown it open a bit more. And not to play armchair college baseball coach, but I thought he got kind of a quick hook in the ninth inning when they went to Murray originally, though I understand wanting to go to Murray in that spot, and he's been quite good historically in this program and even this season. But I thought he did a really good job. Somebody who might be another young arm to watch coming out of the bullpen. Diego Luzardo also getting a scoreless 10th inning with that ghost runner. I think in a big spot there. That's really good. And yeah, just Tim Murray, like you said, coming up there, just had struggled pretty badly. Tim Williamson, Jesus, why Tim? I'm merging Tim Williamson and Justin Murray. Sorry guys. Tim Williamson had two pretty poor appearances, like you said, prior to this one, and striking out 3 of the 4 batters he faced with a tying run at the plate there at the end. I think really spectacular.
Yeah, so the Cougs are currently, as we speak, hosting Sam Houston State in the first game of the Don Sanders Cup. The Bearcats opened the year taking 2 out of 3 against Oklahoma State, but they did just lose 2 of 3 to St. John's last weekend, the same team that Houston beat 2 out of 3 the weekend before. The Bearcats' only game away from home this year has been a midweek game at Rice that they lost 7-3. So definitely a game you want to get against a rival. That one is currently 1-0 to the Bearcats in the bottom of the 5th. Cougs batting with a guy on first and 1 out. So plenty of time left to hopefully have a Houston lineup that has been pretty good, so far this year, for the most part. Get going a little bit and try to get game 1 of the Don Sanders Cup. And then this weekend they'll be hosting Baylor. This is a Bears team that went just 20-35 last year, was picked 11th in the Big 12 preseason poll, a couple of spots behind the Cougars. So really big series right out of the gates in terms of being a series that Houston really needs to win at least 2 out of 3. Just because there's a lot of much tougher weekend series ahead of you than this one in Big 12 play. This is one of your, not quote unquote easiest weekend series. So I think the Cougs will be doing themselves a world of good to take at least 2 out of 3. Baylor opened the season 1-7, admittedly against a pretty impressively tough slate of opponents for the most part. But then this past weekend it did get a sweep at home over Oral Roberts. You don't know exactly how much that one means because the Golden Eagles were one of the surprises of the college baseball world last year. They won 52 games, went to the College World Series, actually beat TCU in the opening game of the College World Series. But did open this season losing 2 out of 3 to Evansville. So it might be a flash in the pan. So, obviously early on in the year, it's hard to kind of squint to these games. And this team lost to this one, who lost to this one, so hard to know. But, like I said, just given where Baylor was last year, given where their coaches are picking them this year in the preseason poll, like I said, at home, this needs to be at least 2 out of 3 for the Cougs.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, 4-7 in the season so far, with, like I said, the context that they played a very challenging non-conference schedule, though you only get so much credit if you don't win any of those like 6 matchups against the tougher teams, like Baylor failed to do. You alluded to it. D1 baseball in their preseason Big 12 thing had Baylor second to last in the league, ahead of only BYU. Coached by Mitch Thompson, who's in his second year overseeing the program after a 10-year stint at the big junior college in Waco McLennan, which is JUCO baseball power. Before that, had an almost 20-year stint as a Baylor assistant. And the Bears do look like they have a pretty tough lineup. Enzo Apodaca, a Gonzaga transfer, along with Hunter Toplansky, and one-time U of H player Will Pendergrass, are all hitting above 300 coming into the week. Generally, as a lineup, they have solid extra base power, respectable strikeout rate. And even in the preseason, the Baylor lineup was expected to be stronger than the pitching. And, oh, buddy, even acknowledging the high-level opponent that they faced in non-conference, that pitching staff has not looked great. Baylor pitchers, I will say, do have good strikeout per 9 rate, but they're also walking over 5 batters per 9 innings. For comparison, the Cougars are walking 3, and just have really struggled. Baylor has to find a reliable starter in the young season. You look at their staff, and Baylor actually has several relievers with pretty solid numbers, but none of the guys who've started game this year have an ERA lower than the high 5s. It kind of is the opposite problem to what the Cougars have had, where the stars have been consistent, if not going to super deep into games, and the relief has been kind of inconsistent. So yeah, like you said, I think at home, especially, this series has to be the Cougars winning 2 of 3. A sweep would be nice, but minimum winning 2 of 3 here to feel decent about the rest of Big 12 play and feel like you're kind of on schedule to be a solid middle of the pack Big 12 team, like we think it could be, but aren't 100% sure are.
And then switching to the other bat and ball sport, we saw Cougar softball losing extras to McNeese on Wednesday. A game that if you listened to our last week, you heard us excitedly react to Houston after being down 3-0, tying it up with a 3 spot in the 4th. They would take a 4-3 lead in the 5th inning on a solo homer from Mandy Esmond, her second as a Cougar. But down to their final at bat, McNeese scratched out a run in the top of the 7th to tie it up. And then in extras, it was quiet for a few innings. McNeese manufactures a run in the top of the 11th, but Houston ties it back up in the bottom of the 11th with a run of their own on an Amanda Carden RBI single. Unfortunately, After that single, then not only tied the game up, but put runners on first and second with only one out. The Cougars were not able to push across the winning run. Got another golden opportunity in the bottom of the 12th to win it. Had the bases loaded with two outs with their best player, Taria Coleman, at the plate, but she fouled out. Wasn't able to walk this one off. And then McNeese scores a run, of course, right away in the top of the 13th. And again, Houston, another opportunity, got two runners on base in the bottom half of the 13th, but couldn't get them across. Ultimately lost 6-5 in 13 innings. Tough loss before then, like I said, taking care of business against a bad opponent in A&M Commerce, beating them 10-1, 22-4, and 8-2. I'm glad none of the games were close, but, that kind of had to be at how, that also means that you're, now 20 games into the season, you got a 15-5 record, but still lack anything remotely resembling a quality win on the year. So, I guess 3-1 in the week is never terrible, but it's not really anything that benefits you either.
No, I mean, for some context, even though you played some not great teams early in the season, Commerce was by far your lowest rated RPI opponent today. I kind of don't understand. I don't understand playing a series there. Like, I think I get not wanting to load up on really difficult opponents when your conference is going to be largely really difficult opponents, but you didn't learn anything about yourself in that one. Like, I'm sorry, there's no way that playing one of the worst 30 teams in the country really allows you to glean anything useful. And again, glad the Cougars won all three games by a pretty large margin, run ruling in two of them. And not saying that the weekend before you open conference play in a really difficult conference needs to be another really brutally difficult team, but there had to be somebody out there who was willing to host a Big 12 program this weekend that was maybe not a super far drive away than A&M Commerce. Like, I'm sorry, like you might as well just, because maybe you wanted the road experience, and that's fine, even though you had that last weekend in Baton Rouge, but just like, come on, there had to be someone better available. I just, knowing nothing about scheduling softball, I still refuse to think that there wasn't someone better out there you could have played, because we didn't learn anything, good, bad, or indifferent, about the Cougs after these three games.
Yeah, quality of competition will not be a problem for the Cougars this coming weekend. They will be playing the return midweek game at McNeese on Wednesday before hosting the Longhorns this weekend. So yeah, fun rematch with the Cowgirls after that 13 inning.
Good program, by the way. McNeese is a good
Yes.
softball program.
Yeah, I think they're receiving votes in at least one of the polls right now. Solid mid-major program would definitely give you a chance to get that that elusive first meaningful win. Yeah, and then you face UT Austin on the weekend, who are 18-1, a bunch of wins over highly ranked teams. Their one loss coming in extra innings to a really good ranked Stanford team. They are the #1 team in the country in at least one of the polls, with your three-time reigning champs Oklahoma Sooners taking a surprising loss to Louisiana Lafayette on Sunday. So yeah, you go from a weekend where anything less than a sweep would have been a disaster to a weekend where anything other than getting swept would be a huge success.
Yeah, like I said a minute ago, where you don't learn anything good, bad, or indifferent about the Cougs from the A&M Commerce series probably holds true this weekend for like exactly the opposite reason. Because I mean, it gives me no pleasure to say this. Like, this Longhorn team could be as good as Oklahoma this year. That's the level of program the Cougs are facing. I think, being insulting to the Sooners by saying that. 18-1 team. Reese Atwood came into this week hitting 527 with 10 homers. We're deep enough into the season that those are crazy numbers that you can no longer say are just like the product of a really good weekend. 6 Longhorn hitters, including Atwood, are batting 400 or better coming into the week. They don't have a single lineup regular, which I'm defining for this case as at least 30 at-bats coming into the week, with a batting average below 319, Dustin. And that's not even the craziest stat. None of those are the craziest stat, Dustin. The craziest stat I would posit is that their pitching staff has allowed 11 earned run, or allowed, excuse me, because obviously I'm not including the most recent game, 11 earned runs in their first 18 games this season. Like, that's insane. That's an average of less than an earned run per game, like, from a team who played like a tough, like, didn't just load up with bad teams. Like, they played a lot of really good teams in their non-conference. Yep. So I would go so far as to say is, if U of H can avoid getting run ruled in 2 of 3 games this weekend, that's a successful weekend. And I think we've been pretty critical of this program and its leadership. I think even in this specific segment about this team, this isn't the weekend to make any kind of big pronouncements about what Cougar softball is going to be. If they can get one of these games to be competitive, I'll be pretty freaking happy about it.
Yeah. I think unfortunately, Sam, that only leaves us. We're going to talk golf next week when Bobby gets back.
Yeah,
So that only leaves us with Cougar
I'm
tennis, who
ready.
suffered some. I'm going to go ahead and say predictable blowout losses as they got into Big 12 play.
Yep, open Big 12 play last Thursday afternoon against number 26 Texas Tech. The best thing I can say about it was that Sophie Skoten could have won her singles match as she won the first set against Tech's Maria Polishuk, but that match went unfinished after Tech clinched the team win thanks to their wins in other courts, beating the Cougs officially 6-0. Saturday morning, the Cougs hosted number 45 BYU, which got off to a bit better start thanks to Skoten and Sonia Kovalenko winning their doubles match, though. Unfortunately, BYU would take a close 6-4 win over Elena Trincheva and Blanca Cortia Pereno to take the team doubles point. The best chance the Cougs had in singles came from the team's lone freshman, actually, Nina Skoric, who took her BYU counterpart to 3 sets before losing 6-0 in the deciding third set, ultimately clinched the match for BYU with that 4-0 lead. Dustin, in an effort to find something, anything worth being positive about from this one, I will note that Maria Jimashkevich was up 2-1 in the third set of her singles match before. It was obviously left unfinished. And Sonia Kovalenko was also close to forcing a deciding third set with a big tiebreaker lead in her match as well before that one went unfinished because BYU clinched the win. So not to put too fine a point on it, but oh man, not a lot of positives from the first two Big 12 matches as the Cougs now sit with a 1-7 record on the season. And Dustin, I don't know if it's going to be much better in the coming week. The Cougs, I guess the good news are going to TCU, who is not an ITA ranked opponent like Tech and BYU. But the bad news is they're coming off 2 straight road Big 12 wins over Cincy and West Virginia, where the Horned Frogs didn't drop a single point in either match. TCU also comfortably beat a UT Arlington team that the Cougars lost to, if you're looking for common opponents. So maybe a better chance in Fort Worth to win a team point in this one as compared to Tech or BYU, but don't see any reason to be wildly optimistic, and definitely do not see a reason to be wildly optimistic about the Cougs going to a better Baylor team in Waco, a consensus top 30 team. They have an 8-5 overall record. Like TCU, they got their first 2 conference wins of the season, actually from a road swing over Cincy and West Virginia as well, though obviously in a different order. Then the Horned Frogs, the Bears played a really difficult non-conference schedule. They faced 4 top 25 opponents, certainly looking like a team that'll be competing in the sports postseason, though Baylor did drop 2 points at Cincy in the Big 12 opener, and they have a somewhat worse winning percentage in doubles, which has been kind of this Cougar team strength. That, yeah, I think like the TCU match, the best case scenario is the Cougars might win a point on the road. So, not a lot of reasons for positivity, Dustin, as much as I'm trying to find them.
Yeah, that might, as we kind of alluded to earlier, that feels like the team that's going to unfortunately
Yeah, that's why I alluded to earlier.
ruin the
It's
no
this
last
team.
place
Sorry.
finishes. Let's knock on wood. Maybe Cincinnati, West Virginia are beatable teams. We'll find out, but
Sure
yeah,
hope so.
not looking too great. So that's the note we're gonna end this episode on. As always, want to encourage you, as Sam said up top, to go to SH or not SH podcast. Or you can go to shpodcast.com. You can, if you want to indirectly get to our Patreon, you can do that, but you can also just directly go to patreon.com/SH podcast. $5 a month, bonus content, good karma, all that good stuff. You can also support us by leaving us a 5-star review in your app of choice. You can support our friends, the 1012 Network, and you can support our sponsors, Charlie Hustle and Autograph, by getting some fantastic merch and a fantastic handy dandy app that I've been playing with when Sam has been talking throughout this entire episode. If you want to reach out to us, you can email us shpodcast@gmail.com. You can tweet at us at shpodcast, or you can get a 100% chance of a follow back and a reply by hitting us up at podcast.bsky.social. That's it for us. You're an absolute rock star if you made it all the way to the end of this episode. And as always,
Go Cougs.